The show focused on delivering beneficial information on everything to do with products and services that can improve your life. This is Experts on Call on AM 650.
Welcome back to Quay Pacific's Talk About Strata. Sterling Fox with you, along with my co-host Tony Giventu, Executive Director of the Condominium Homeowners Association of British Columbia, joined in studio by Dan O'Hearn and Barrett Hansen from Quay Pacific Property Management. And we're talking about renters in strata environments. That's basically the subject of today's program. And Dan, just before we took the break, you and Tony were kicking around this notion of hardship exemption for people who want to rent or need to rent, perhaps from their perspective, their strata units. Could you elaborate on that a little bit? Who qualifies and what are the circumstances under which it's accepted?
I wish it was cut and dry that we know the acceptable circumstances. I think that's that's the part of the dilemma.
Okay. It's case to case.
It's
then.
Case to case because my hardship may not be yours.
Right.
Right. So, but I think what people have to realize is the council really has rights to request you to disclose a lot of information, prove that this is hardship.
Right.
And just saying I'll sell and lose $50,000 is not a hardship. For you, perhaps, right? But you'd have to prove that it is. I don't know, Tony, you probably see these all the time.
It's a complicated process, and it's one of those issues that only the Strata Council can deal with.
Okay.
Because it comes down to their pseudo-judiciary role that they play in deciding whether this is going to be a bylaw exemption or not. Their basic duty is they must enforce bylaws. So to grant this exemption, it has to be an exceptional set of circumstances.
Okay.
But not undue, not to the point of undue. They have to be reasonable about this. So I'm getting transferred somewhere for 2 years with my job, and I cannot afford both residences at the same time, and I'm going to be coming back to this residence when I'm finished.
Right.
The Strata Corporation can and will likely say, we will grant you a hardship exemption for 2 years, put a finite date on it,
right.
And at which time you must reoccupy your unit or you'll be in violation of the rental bylaw.
Okay.
And so the Strata Corporation can do that, and they can request all of your personal financial information. The Strata needs to verify what you're telling them
really a
is true.
hardship. Exactly.
Yeah, you don't get to just go in and make up a story and get the Strata Council to believe it.
Dan, I'm curious, from a property manager's perspective, you've alluded on more than one occasion on this conversation so far about secret people living in strata. So how do you, the property manager, count renters?
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, the Form B is certainly one place you're going to look at, but that's requiring the disclosure. I think what you're asking is if we have an
undisclosed tenant.
Well, it's hard to disclose something that's undisclosed, but I think what's important is dealing when someone wants to make application for a tenancy, right? Seeing if there is space for that within the bylaw, right? So when you take the total number of rentals, we all know that if it's rented, it's rented. But as far as what's being available, we have to remove from that any sort of the hardships or any of the families because they are not considered to be true tenants as far as the bylaw goes, right? That number has to come, but.
No, Dan's absolutely right. So, put it anecdotally. The Strata has a rental limit of 5.
Okay.
Right? Okay, it's a 100-unit building. And what they contain within those 5 are going to be those rentals that have been granted permission to rent under the bylaw. Not hardship, not family, and depending on the bylaw, not owner-developer exemptions as well because they're exempt from rental bylaws. So that is determined ultimately by the bylaw. So while we may have only 3 rentals that have been given permission to rent, we might have 17 other renters. We might have family, hardship, owner-developer exemptions, all these other things.
Right.
So the management of all of these rentals on a rental inventory is, I don't think anyone realizes what a daunting task this is.
Barrett, from the perspective of, and we've been addressing this whole thing from the perspective of the owner of this strata unit who's renting to someone. What about, flip the coin for us again, what about the prospective renter going into a strata environment? It's slightly different than going into a rental apartment building. It's a slightly different game a playing field that you're on. Give us a little advice for those people looking at renting in a condo.
Well, I think it goes back to what we talked about earlier about ensuring that you understand what strata living is, because it is, like you said, Sterling, different than living in a rental building.
Sure.
You have to abide by the bylaws. which you have to sign for on Form K within 2 weeks of moving in. And you need to understand and stay on top of if there are changes to the bylaws as well. So it is more onerous in some ways to live in a strata because you have potentially more restrictions.
Well, and you'll have age restrictions, rental
Yes.
restrictions, pet restrictions.
Yes.
All of those apply to tenants.
Right.
The bylaws that apply to everybody apply to tenants.
Yes.
Okay. And Dan, from an administrative point of view, with respect to renters versus owners, I would imagine the best and most effective way to deal with it. Everybody's the same. You've got to manage the building. They all share space, don't they?
We're managing people that are occupying space,
Right.
whether they're a tenant or family or an owner or the president. I mean, everyone is treated fairly and equitably, and we always go to the bylaws and the Strata Property Act for the governance of that.
All right. That is unfortunately our program. We're fresh out of time. Well, just wanted to give Tony a couple of seconds because 2 weeks from tonight, you folks at the Condominium Homeowners Association have a big seminar coming up.
We have a seminar in downtown Vancouver at Shaw Tower on Wednesday, May 28th. It goes from 2 to 4 in the afternoon. There's no charge to attend, but people will have to register in advance because there's limited space.
Okay.
So call our toll-free line at 877-353-2462 at extension 2 and you'll get registered, or email the office@choa.bc.ca.
Okay, or just go to the website and all of it will fall into place for you. 2 websites to recommend very quickly: Tony's choa.bc.ca and Dan and Barrett's, which is Quay Pacific, Quay, sneaky key,
It is.
QayPacific.com. Dan and Barrett, thanks so much for coming in. Great to have
Thanks,
you on the
Dan.
show.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Tony, we'll see you next time.
That was fun.
It was.